So when we talk about therapy, I think we started off with the most difficult question. So therapy, if we go by the definition in the dictionary, it's a treatment for mental illness and mental disorders and distress. However, in my experience, in my practice, therapy is much more than that. It's almost like a healing journey where a therapist or a trained mental health professional, along with a client, will go on a healing journey together, which addresses any of their distress, any of their mental health symptoms, or any kind of troubles they're facing in their daily life. When we talk about the mediums of therapies, uh, traditionally there was one medium of therapy, which was to come in front of a trained therapist or a counselor and do face to face therapy. And that's how it's been happening for many, many years. However, in the past few years, we're seeing a very drastic shift in the mode of therapy with the rise of telecounseling and telepsychiatry. And this is because of the ongoing pandemic that's happening, where face to face communication has reduced drastically, right? So, a lot of people are uncomfortable with this because, especially in a healing space, in that safe space, you want to be face to face with a counselor. But there are also a lot of advantages to this, wherein the government has kind of now brought on guidelines for telecounseling, where a lot of people before, say in rural pockets of India, or people who wouldn't go to a therapist clinic for treatment because of the stigma, now have a lot more access to mental health services because it's all online. So there are pros and there are cons, but now offline therapy is now, or telepsychiatry or teletherapy as we call it, has now become the forefront of what mental health services look like. Like I said earlier, in the beginning, there was a lot of hesitancy to do things online because, say, in a group therapy setting or when you're with a counselor, there's shared emotions, there's shared space, and in the therapy setup, it is a very vulnerable, intimate space, and so a lot of people prefer that face-to-face kind of interaction. However, with the pandemic, a lot of people haven't had, even a lot of counselors, to be on the safer side, are taking sessions from home. A lot of the services are happening from home. So it's a subjective process. Some people prefer it face to face. Some people prefer sitting at home and just logging on to a Zoom call and doing therapy. So I would say that's something that is subjective and there's no objective answer to that. Now, what happens with therapy is that it is generalized to private practitioners who charge a significant amount. When we say all therapy is expensive, that's definitely a myth. What the government of India is also doing and have been working very hard to do is to, in every government health center, which we know all government health centers are free of cost for treatment, in every one of these centers, they have incorporated mental health. They either have a counselor or a therapist or a psychiatrist there, or they have trained the general doctors in mental health services. So there, in these setups, actually mental health services are completely free. A lot of private practitioners also do pro bono therapy. So I wouldn't say that all therapy is expensive, but like any service that we have, there is a range of, there is a price range that that it caters to. With therapy, all information that happens inside, all information that is shared inside of the therapy room remains strictly confidential. In fact, mental health professionals, when you start therapy, there'll be, usually it's a it's a form that you sign. It's like an agreement or a contract. Nowadays, it's an online contract where you kind of agree to the terms and conditions of therapy. Nobody wants the information out there for the world to see. The confidentiality of the client is almost a given. It's a understood that your information is not going to be shared. However, the counselor will also check with you, when can we break confidentiality, right? So there's like a terms and conditions applied. If you are going to harm yourself, can you give me an emergency contact of somebody we can contact in case you are in danger to yourself or to society around you? And even in those cases, I will inform that person with your consent, right? So therapy is a given, But in the case that it has to be broken, it will always be done with consent. Approach a counselor, a psychotherapist, a psychiatrist. This is a common misunderstanding. When somebody's mental distress or mental health is affecting their functionality, which means that I am so depressed or so anxious that I cannot go to work the next day, I cannot interact with people, it's affecting me functionally. In a lot of these cases, you need psychiatric medication. You need something strong to kind of, that quite literally helps with hormonal imbalances, neurochemicals in your brain. In that case, you go to a psychiatrist who is a medical doctor who will prescribe you medications which helps with your neurochemicals in the brain. If there are emotional disorders, a lot of the time say today I am acting in a way that I'm a very anxious person, but it comes from some childhood trauma and I want to work through that trauma, then a lot of times it's a psychologist or a psychotherapist where we deal with that trauma, we work through it, we come up with coping mechanisms. The last one would be a counselor. Say I don't care about my neurochemicals are fine. My childhood trauma, I'm unaware of that. I'm just stressed on a day-to-day basis and I need somebody to talk to. I need somebody to vent to. I need somebody to help, solve some of my everyday problems. Then I will go to a counselor. So based on what the issue is, there are these three kinds of mental health professionals who we can approach. A lot of times, some of these professionals also work together because sometimes you need, say, a psychologist, but you also need medication. So sometimes they work together, sometimes they work separately. But a lot of people don't know which to go at what point. So if you approach either of these, they'll probably guide you in the right direction. It's almost like a doctor. Today, if I have a cough or a cold or a fever, I know I have to go to a doctor's visit. If I fall down the stairs and I break my hand, I know I have to go to the doctor to fix my fracture. A lot of times, our body also responds to mental stress. Some people have changes in their sleep and appetite. They lead to little or they lead to much. Some people have changes in their sleep patterns. I'm not getting enough sleep or I'm sleeping too much. Some people have low motivation. Some people, it also shows up physically. When people are stressed, they get ulcers. So there are a lot of physiological and mental signs that the body is trying to tell us. What is important is that actually each of us intuitively know when something is wrong with us. The key is to listen to these signs of the body, because a lot of times the body is giving us signs, the mind is giving us signs, but we don't really take the time to listen. So when you notice certain changes in your body, in local Indian languages, there are also phrases, right? My mind is feeling shaky, or I'm not able to concentrate and work. These are all signs that maybe you're stressed. So the key is to listen to these signs of the body and seek help when you need to. I think a lot of times the whole process of therapy is subjective. Somebody may have, say, a death of a parent or a death of a spouse, and they may handle it very beautifully and they may be able to process their emotions. Somebody else, on the other hand, say, may not get into the college of their choice, or may not get into the school of their choice. And that challenge or that setback might be something that is very detrimental to them. So the human experience itself is very subjective. We can't say, oh, death of a spouse, you need to go to therapy. You didn't get into the college, it's not that much of a serious issue, you don't need therapy. It's very subjective, right? And nobody knows that except the person themselves. So which is why I said it's very important to kind of listen to what the voice in your own mind is trying to communicate with you. Each therapy session is around 45 to 60 minutes. However, I mean, this is a rough outline. Sometimes it's lesser in time. Sometimes if the client comes in with a lot of trauma that you have to deal with, in all likelihood, you may not say, okay, 60 minutes are over, bye, see you next week. You might have to take some more time to process that. So sometimes it may even go to 2 hours, sometimes it may even go to 3 hours. But on average, 45 to 60 minutes is what most therapists sessions will last. is a subjective answer. It's not a black and white answer. Some people feel better with one therapy session. Some people feel better after 3 years of therapy. What is important here is that it doesn't just depend on how the therapist can deliver. Of course, whether you find the right therapist is an important key factor here. But also, when you are receiving therapy, how ready are you to process that information? How ready are you to kind of implement certain strategies that you may come up with your therapist? How is the environment supporting you towards your own growth? These are all external factors that play a role in your healing. So on average, what we say is 4 to 6 months is a good amount of time for you to see significant healing in your life. However, some people say go through 4 to 6 months, they don't feel like they have worked through everything that they set out to, but they still feel good about the process. They still feel like they are on that journey of healing. And some people even stay in therapy for years. A lot of therapists will actually phase out the therapy process. So, say for 6 months, you've been going for therapy every week. The therapist might say, okay, I feel like you're getting better. Let's see if we can start to phase out. So then it might be once in 2 weeks. Then it might be once a month. Then we may say, okay, you know what? I feel okay. I'm not going to come back to therapy. We can close our relationship. 6 months later, something happens in your life and you feel like, you know what? I feel like I need to get back into therapy. I need that support again. You can always reapproach your therapist and you can start therapy again. So it's not like once you stop, you cannot restart. That's definitely an option. Once you get over the initial fear of, oh my God, I'm in a therapist's room. This is a new person. Are they judging me? Are they going to leak my information? Once you get through, and you will see this, right, in therapy sessions, at first, most clients are very reserved. They're like, oh, I'm not going to tell this therapist too much. But once you get over that fear, once you start to feel comfortable, it's actually a very cathartic process. A lot of us just, by being in the society, we have learned to repress our emotions. We have learned not to share our emotions. We have learned to stuff all of our emotions into a little airtight box and keep it closed and just hold on to that. So when we're in a therapy session and we open that lid and we're like, okay, maybe I can share this, it's almost like a weight is lifted off your shoulders. So actually, the process of therapy itself is very cathartic. It feels good. So usually, when you kind of start to feel that, when you start to see certain progress in your life, you know that therapy is working for you. But therapy is also almost like a roller coaster. You take 3 steps forward, you take 1 step back or 2 steps back, like any journey. So it's a process, but you'll probably be able to see progress in your life. Some of my clients have told me, oh, my parents have noticed these changes in me. My friends are saying they've noticed this about me. My boyfriend or girlfriend is saying, I'm not so irritable anymore. You'll feel it. Maybe the people around you will start to see it. So that's probably how you know that it's working for you. What I feel is quite important to a good therapist is also the match between the client and the therapist. Some clients feel more comfortable with a certain therapist than the other. So sometimes you have to go through that trial and error to see which therapist works for you. That being said, there are certain general qualities that a good therapist will have. Like they're able to make you feel safe inside of that space. They are non-judgmental of what you tell them. They're not sitting there in judgment of whatever you say. In the journey of healing, the therapist ideally should be traveling along with you. Not in front of you, not behind you, but it's almost like a journey of healing where you all go together. Yeah. A lot of people think that a good therapist will give you all your answers, but that's actually so untrue. A good therapist will not give you any answers. A good therapist is someone who will help you find your own answers. Because if the therapist says, this is your problem, do A, B, C, those are not your solutions, those are your therapist's solutions. Everyone has to kind of go through that process and find their own solution. Therapist is someone who will be empathetic, They won't try to solve your problems. They won't bring their personal biases into the therapy room. uh, like today, there's a lot of divide in religion, in caste. These are social issues that as Indians we have faced for centuries, right? A good therapist almost removes themselves from that. They're not ignorant of these social problems, but they don't bring their own personal biases into the uh, therapy room where they're almost maybe discriminating against certain clients, right? So those boundaries should be very clear, and a good therapist will have those boundaries. Fortunately, today, the field of mental health is becoming a lot more sensitive to the social issues that are happening around us. Mental health treatment for a lot of years was like a Eurocentric concept for rich white Europeans. However, today, if you look at the context in which mental health practitioners are doing their work, it is becoming more centric to the social issues that are happening, or more sensitive, I would say, right? So, for example, if there is a member of the LGBTQIA plus community that wants to seek help, and they know that, okay, if I go, ideally all therapists should be clear of their biases, but we don't live in an ideal world. So today you can actually go online, or there are a lot of organizations like Therapies where they will tell you, okay, this person has done a course on queer affirmative therapy. So you know that they have been officially certified, or they have done an official educational course that tells them how to better deal with issues of the LGBTQIA plus community, right? If I know that one particular client has some kind of abuse in their history, today you have trauma informed therapy, right? But these are also assuming that the client has enough knowledge and awareness to seek that out. But even if you don't, you can go to any therapist, and if you feel any kind of discrimination, you are not bound to stay in that therapeutic relationship. You are allowed to leave and find a better therapist for yourself. So, and sometimes that leads to bad experiences, and that is unfortunate, but you can always remove yourself from that situation and find a better fit for yourself. Luckily, I'm at a stage in the mental health field where stigma of mental health, of mental disorders is coming down. However, the stigma is still very much there, right? And because there is a large stigma against mental illness in India, a lot of people refrain from seeking help. They don't seek help because somebody will call me crazy, somebody will call me a psychopath, somebody will ostracize me from my community, and they don't seek help, right? However, when you don't seek help, you're allowing the condition to get worse, right? For example, if there is a patient who has cancer, or say if they have, it's like breast cancer, right? They say, okay, scan your breast for lumps, right? If you scan your breast for a lump and you find the lump and you're like, oh my God, this is scary, I'm going to wait, and the condition worsens. And then if you go to an oncologist, the condition will probably be harder to treat. It's the same thing with mental illness, right? Say if you're seeing symptoms of depression or anxiety or any of these disorders in you, or just stress, and you let it build up and build up and build up, it's harder to treat, right? So something that I would like to say is that we need to start doing away with the stigma. We're halfway there, but we still have a little bit to go. We need to do away with the stigma and be okay to seek help. It doesn't make us weak. It doesn't make us vulnerable or a failure to be able to seek help, right? And something that is very important, I think, is that getting your mental health on track doesn't just mean going to therapy. Therapy is still a very new concept in India. It is still inaccessible to some extent. There are a lot of misconceptions about therapy, but there are a lot of ways to get your mental health on track. Community is one way. Connecting with people is one way. Using nature as healing is one way. movement is one way of healing, whether it's running, whether it's doing yoga, whether it's dancing. These are all ways to improve your mental health. Mental health treatment does not just mean going and sitting in a therapy room and talking to a therapist. It's not that linear. Sometimes therapists itself say, go outside, sit in the sun, go outside, meet your friends, go outside, have a good time. These are all ways of healing. So we need to kind of broaden our view of what mental health looks like.